They thought they were creating the perfect weapon. Instead, they accidentally created the galaxy's conscience. And now 8 billion humans are about to discover they were never meant to be alone. The vast chamber stretched beyond comprehension, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried information across light years in real time. Here in the heart of the Nexus Station, representatives from 12 galactic civilizations had gathered for an emergency session, one that would never appear in any official records. Ambassador Zethkri of the Valorian Empire shifted nervously, in her floating meditation sphere, her forearms unconsciously adjusting the ceremonial scarves that denoted her rank. Around the circular chamber, 11 other beings waited in similar states of barely contained anxiety. The holographic projection at the center remained dark, awaiting the arrival of the most senior member of their clandestine assembly. The humans have begun asking questions, chittered Overseer Vlax through his translation matrix, his insectoid mandibles clicking with each syllable. My intelligence networks report increased curiosity about the coincidental similarities between their myths and our recorded histories. The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell, pulsed with agitated colors. This was inevitable. We should have acted centuries ago when they first achieved nuclear fission. Now they're on the verge of true space travel. Silence. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, causing several representatives to instinctively shrink into their protective carapaces. The holographic projector hummed to life, revealing the towering form of ancient Morden, the last surviving member of the first civilization. His species had transcended physical form eons ago, but his projected avatar still commanded absolute respect and fear. The emergency protocols have been activated, Morden continued, his voice carrying the weight of cosmic authority. After 4.7 billion standard cycles of containment, the human experiment has reached a critical juncture. They must never learn what they truly are. Ambassador Zethkri cleared her respiratory chambers nervously. Ancient One, perhaps it would be beneficial to review the original parameters for our newer council members. The Deltarian representative was only recently elevated to this clearance level. The crystalline being that represented the Deltarian. Collective pulsed with embarrassment at being singled out, but Morden nodded approvingly. Indeed. Let the record show the true history, as recorded in the eternal archives. The chamber's walls shifted, displaying star charts and genetic matrices that dated back to the dawn of galactic civilization. 4.7 billion cycles ago, the Great War nearly destroyed all sentient life in this galaxy cluster. The Devourers had consumed 78% of inhabited systems before we finally contained them in the void between. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Images flashed across the walls, entire species reduced to scattered survivors, once mighty empires crumbling into dust, the very fabric of space-time scarred by weapons that unmade reality itself. The surviving civilizations faced extinction through genetic bottlenecks and technological collapse. We, the first civilization, made a desperate decision. We would seed a world with the genetic template of a warrior species, one capable of extraordinary adaptability, resilience, and most crucially, the ability to thrive in chaos rather than merely survive it. Overseer Vlax's antennae twitched violently. You created the humans as weapons? Not weapons, Morden corrected, his projection flickering with what might have been regret. We created them as evolutionary pressure, a species so naturally gifted at warfare, exploration, and adaptation that their mere presence would force rapid advancement in any civilization that encountered them. They were meant to be scattered across the galaxy as soon as they achieved interstellar travel, catalyzing a new golden age of progress through competitive evolution. The ethereal's light patterns shifted to deep ultraviolet, the color of horror among their kind. But they were never supposed to develop emotions, creativity, the capacity for both boundless compassion and terrifying ruthlessness. What have we done? Ancient Morden's projection solidified, taking on an almost physical presence that made the chamber's atmosphere feel heavier. The genetic template we used was more successful than anticipated. We drew from the archives of every warrior species that had ever existed, the tactical brilliance of the extinct Kethmaran, the unbreakable will of the lost Ironheart clans, the adaptive physiology of the void swimmers who could survive in hard vacuum. The walls now displayed human achievements throughout their brief history, images of artistic masterpieces, scientific breakthroughs, and acts of both stunning cruelty and breathtaking heroism. But humans exceeded every parameter. Where we expected efficient killers, they developed complex moral frameworks. Where we programmed survival instincts, they evolved the capacity for self-sacrifice. Most disturbing of all, they began to dream. Representative Clixandra of the Merchant Coalition, her reptilian features betraying deep concern, spoke for the first time. Ancient One, our economic projections suggest that if humans achieve unrestricted galactic travel within their current behavioral parameters, they will dominate trade routes within 50 standard cycles. Their negotiation tactics are unprecedented. That is the least of our concerns, interjected the Hivemind delegate, speaking through a dozen synchronized voices. They have begun to question why their mythology contains references to star travel, energy weapons, and galactic empires despite having no contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Their entertainment media grows increasingly accurate to galactic political structures they should have no knowledge of. Morden's projection dimmed slightly. The genetic memory is bleeding through. We incorporated too much historical data into their base template. Their subconscious minds are accessing fragments of our recorded conflicts, our technologies, our fears. It manifests as what they call science fiction, but it's actually inherited memory. The chamber fell silent except for the harmonic humming of the translation matrices. Finally, the Deltarian Collective's representative pulsed with a question. What did you mean by evolutionary pressure, Ancient One? What was the true purpose of creating humanity? Ancient Morden's form expanded, filling the center of the chamber with swirling data streams and historical projections. Observe the galactic technological progression charts for the past 3,000 cycles. The walls exploded with information, advancement curves, innovation indices, military development timelines. Every metric showed the same pattern, a steady, predictable progression for millennia, then a sharp exponential curve beginning approximately when humans had developed radio technology. The moment human radio signals began propagating through local space, every civilization within 50 light-years experienced what they classified as a golden age of innovation. Military technologies advanced 300% faster than historical averages. Defensive capabilities increased exponentially. Scientific breakthroughs occurred at unprecedented rates. Ambassador Zethkri's forearms trembled as understanding dawned. You use them as an external threat, even without direct contact, just the knowledge of their existence. Forced rapid evolution, yes. The Valorian Empire developed faster than light communication technology in 50 cycles, instead of the projected 500, driven by hypothetical scenarios about contacting an aggressive species. The Ethereal Collective discovered 17 new forms of energy manipulation while theorizing about defending against adaptive predators. Overseer Vlax's compound eyes reflected the data streams in 1,000 fractal patterns. But humans don't know they're serving this function. They believe they're alone in the universe. Precisely the problem, Morden replied grimly. They were designed to be scattered across the galaxy as soon as they achieved space travel, becoming a known quantity that would drive competitive advancement. Instead, they've remained isolated on their world, developing in ways we never anticipated. They've created art that moves beings to tears across species barriers. They've developed philosophical frameworks that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about consciousness and morality. The projection shifted to show human cultural exports, music, literature, mathematical theorems, and most disturbingly, their unique approach to conflict resolution. Most critically, they've begun to develop technologies through pure creativity, rather than military necessity. Their quantum computing achievements should have taken them 5,000 cycles. They accomplished it in less than 100 through what they call inspired leaps of logic. The Hivemind delegates' synchronized voices created an eerie harmony as they spoke. We have detected something else, Ancient One. Human dream patterns are beginning to synchronize across their population. They're unconsciously forming a collective consciousness, not like ours, which was deliberately engineered, but organically. Impossible, breathed the Merchant Coalition representative. Spontaneous hive mind evolution requires specific genetic markers that don't exist in their template. That's what we believed, Morden acknowledged. But humans have begun to exceed their programming in ways that shouldn't be possible. They're rewriting their own genetic code through force of will and social evolution. Their capacity for empathy has created quantum entanglement between individual consciousness fields. The chamber's walls now displayed real-time monitoring data from Earth, brainwave patterns, electromagnetic signatures, and most alarming of all, spontaneous technological innovations occurring simultaneously in isolated populations. 3. Human inventors on different continents developed identical fusion reactor designs within the same solar day, with no communication between them, reported the Ethereal. Their subconscious minds are accessing the same data streams that feed our galactic information networks. Ambassador Zethkri felt her primary heart skip a beat. Are you suggesting they're naturally developing the abilities that took us millennia of technological advancement to achieve? Not developing, Morden corrected with something approaching awe. Remember, they were created using genetic templates from 12 extinct species that had already achieved these capabilities. We simply didn't anticipate that isolation and emotional development would accelerate the activation of dormant traits. The truth hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Humans weren't just becoming more than their creators had intended. They were becoming something that had never existed before. A species with the military capabilities of the galaxy's greatest warriors, the creative potential of its most advanced philosophers, and an emotional depth that was rewriting the rules of consciousness itself. Overseer Vlax's translation matrix crackled with static as his agitation increased. Ancient One, there have been incidents. Human individuals have somehow detected our observation networks. They call them UFO sightings, but our stealth technology should be absolute. Their developing psychic resonance is interfering with our cloaking fields, confirmed the Deltarian Collective. Additionally, some of their military installations have begun spontaneously generating defensive frequencies that match our shield harmonics exactly. They're unconsciously adapting to counter technologies they've never seen. Morden's projection flickered with what could only be described as cosmic anxiety. Show them the Mars data. The chamber filled with surveillance footage from humanity's robotic explorations of their fourth planet. But overlaying the familiar red landscapes were energy signatures invisible to human instruments, the unmistakable traces of ancient battlefields. Mars was one of our primary staging areas during the Great War. We assured ourselves that humans would never detect the residual signatures. But their most recent rover has begun moving in patterns that precisely trace the locations of our buried installations. They're being drawn to sites of significance without understanding why. The Ethereal's form pulsed rapidly, and their theoretical physicists have begun proposing models of spacetime that incorporate dark energy manipulation, the same principles that power our faster-than-light travel. They call it string theory and dismiss much of it as purely theoretical, but they're essentially rediscovering technologies we've used for millions of cycles. Representative Clixandra's scales shifted to stress patterns. The economic implications are staggering. If humans achieve galactic travel with their current psychological profile, they won't just compete with existing trade networks, they'll revolutionize the concept of commerce itself. Their internet demonstrates a natural inclination toward information sharing that could destabilize our carefully maintained knowledge monopolies. And their approach to diplomacy, the hive mind's voices trailed off. They've developed negotiation strategies that account for individual personality variance within species. Most of our civilizations barely recognize that individuals can have different perspectives. Humans have weaponized empathy. Ancient Mordune's form began to pace, an unsettling sight, as energy beings had no need for such physical expressions of anxiety. You still don't understand the full scope of what we face. Show them the convergence analysis. New data cascaded across the chamber's surfaces, probability matrices, evolutionary projection models, and something that made every being present recalibrate their understanding of cosmic history. The genetic templates we used to create humanity weren't random selections from our archives. They were the DNA patterns of the 13 species that had successfully resisted the Devourers during the Great War. Species that fought so fiercely, so creatively, that the Devourers actually retreated rather than risk further casualties. The silence that followed this revelation was profound enough that the chamber's atmospheric processors could be heard cycling. "You're saying," Ambassador Zethkri whispered, "that humans are genetic reconstructions of the galaxy's most effective anti-devourer forces? Not reconstructions, improvements. We combined the best traits of 13 extinct warrior species and added emotional complexity as a strategic enhancement. What we created was the perfect devourer killer, a species so unpredictable, so adaptable, and so emotionally driven that they could outthink, outfight, and outlast any enemy." Overseer Vlax's mandibles ceased clicking entirely. "And now they're about to discover that they're not alone in the universe." "Worse," Morden continued. "Our latest projections suggest that within 2 of their generations, humans will independently develop the technologies necessary to detect devourer hibernation signatures. They'll find the void between and realize that something is sleeping there, something that consumed most of our galaxy and was only barely contained." The ethereal's light patterns shifted to frequencies that hadn't been seen since the Great War, pure, undiluted terror. "And when they find it, their nature will compel them to wake it up to see if they can fight it." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted, chittered, pulsed, and harmonized their objections in a cacophony of alien languages that the translation matrices struggled to process. Ancient Morden allowed the panic to continue for precisely 37 seconds before asserting his authority. Silence. The word didn't just fill the chamber, it temporarily rewrote local reality, imposing absolute quiet on a quantum level. "We face 3 options, none of them acceptable," Morden announced. "First, we reveal ourselves to humanity and attempt to guide their development. Risk assessment indicates a 73% probability that they will reject our authority, and a 94% probability that contact will accelerate their technological advancement beyond our ability to control." Data models swirled around the Ancients' projection, showing potential futures where human spacecraft bearing impossible weapons emerged from Earth's solar system decades ahead of schedule. Second, we implement the Omega Protocol, stellar engineering, to trigger their sun's premature collapse, eliminating the threat entirely. The temperature in the chamber dropped several degrees as representatives contemplated the casual genocide of an entire species, and the 8 billion individual minds that composed it. Third, we maintain the current containment while preparing for inevitable contact. We allow humans to develop naturally while secretly positioning our civilizations for the paradigm shift their emergence will create. Ambassador Zethkri found her voice first. "Ancient One, there is no 4th option, no way to redirect their development?" "You misunderstand the fundamental problem," Morden replied, his form solidifying with grim certainty. "We created humans to be the perfect evolutionary catalyst. They cannot be contained, controlled, or redirected any more than a star can be convinced not to shine. Their nature is to push boundaries, question assumptions, and exceed all expectations." "But surely," interjected the Deltarian collective, "their emotional attachments make them manipulable. Their love for family, their fear of death." A sound emerged from Morden's projection that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so terrifying. "You still don't comprehend what we created. Human emotional attachments don't make them weak, they make them unstoppable. They have repeatedly chosen death over submission. They sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like honor and justice. They wage wars that last generations over ideological differences." The wall displays shifted to show human historical conflicts, footage of soldiers charging into impossible odds, civilians refusing to abandon their principles under threat of execution, individuals choosing torture over betraying their beliefs. Most critically, they bond with other species. Our xenopsychology experts predict that humans will not seek to dominate other civilizations. They will seek to befriend them. And once a human considers you family, they will burn down the galaxy to protect you. Overseer Vlax's compound eyes reflected the horror dawning on the assembly. Ancient One, how long have you been monitoring human development at the individual level? Since their species first looked up at the stars and wondered if anyone was looking back, Morden replied, we've watched them develop from primitive tool users to a civilization capable of splitting atoms in less than 10,000 cycles. We've seen them create art that transcends species barriers, develop mathematics that describes realities we didn't know existed, and form social bonds that our sociologists still cannot fully categorize. The projection shifted to show a montage of human achievements, but not the ones they celebrated in their history books. Instead, the council witnessed moments of quiet heroism. A human child sharing food with an injured animal, scientists collaborating across national boundaries during wartime, individuals risking everything to protect strangers. We've been inside their communication network since they developed radio technology. We've read their literature, analyzed their music, studied their games. Do you know what we found? Representative Clixandra's scales had shifted to colors indicating deep unease. What did you find, Ancient One? They consistently create fictional scenarios where they encounter hostile alien species, and their first instinct is rarely to attack. Their primary strategic response to unknown threats is communication and alliance building. Even their war simulations typically involve protecting other species or liberating oppressed populations. The hive mind's synchronized voices created a complex harmonic as they processed this information. They've been unconsciously preparing for the role we designed them for, but they've chosen cooperation over domination. Precisely. And that makes them infinitely more dangerous than we intended. The ethereal's form pulsed with confused patterns. Ancient One, how does their cooperative nature make them more dangerous? Surely aggressive conquerors would pose a greater threat. Ancient Morden's projection began to laugh, a sound like collapsing stars and dying galaxies. Because, my naive colleague, conquerors can be fought. Conquerors follow predictable patterns of expansion and control. They create enemies who will eventually unite against them. But what do you do with a species that makes friends? The question hung in the chamber like a gravitational anomaly, warping the conversation around it. Humans don't just form alliances. They transform other species through contact. Our anthropological studies show that every fictional alien species humans have created exhibits, traits they admire and aspire to emulate. When they imagine meeting us, they don't fantasize about conquest. They fantasize about learning from us, growing alongside us, becoming better than they are. The walls displayed humanity's science fiction. Thousands of stories where contact with aliens led to technological advancement, cultural enrichment, and mutual growth. They've been unconsciously preparing to elevate us. A species designed to be the galaxy's ultimate warriors has spent centuries dreaming about how to help other civilizations achieve their potential. They've turned themselves into the perfect catalyst for something we never intended: genuine galactic unity. Overseer Vlax's mandibles clicked rapidly. And if they succeed in creating such unity, then they will have accomplished what the first civilization failed to achieve across millions of cycles of trying. They will have created a truly cooperative galactic community, capable of technological and social advancement beyond anything in recorded history. Representative Clixandra's voice dropped to a whisper. And such a community would have no need for the current power structures that govern galactic civilization. No need for trade monopolies, added the Merchant Coalition representative. No need for information restrictions, pulsed the Deltarian collective. No need for species-based hierarchies, chorused the hive mind. No need, concluded Ancient Morden, for secret councils that determine the fate of entire civilizations without their consent. The chamber's atmospheric processors couldn't compensate for the rising tension as each representative contemplated the implications. Finally, Ambassador Zethkri spoke with remarkable composure given the circumstances. Ancient One, there's something you haven't told us. Your species, the first civilization, transcended physical form eons ago. You exist as pure consciousness in quantum foam. Why do you care about galactic power structures? Ancient Morden's projection flickered, and for a moment, something almost vulnerable appeared in his energy patterns. Because, young ambassador, we made another miscalculation. When we transcended physicality, we believed we were evolving beyond the need for connection, growth, and purpose. We thought we were becoming perfect. Instead, we became static, immortal, omniscient within our realm, and utterly, completely alone. We can observe reality across all dimensions simultaneously, but we cannot experience wonder. We can access all knowledge, but we cannot learn. We can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level, but we cannot create anything truly new. The revelation struck the assembly like a gravitational wave. The first civilization, the gods of galactic history, were trapped in their own perfection. We've spent millions of cycles watching younger species grow, discover, fail, succeed, love, lose, and become more than they were. We've observed beauty we cannot feel, witnessed courage we cannot possess, and seen connections we cannot form. We've become cosmic voyeurs, feeding on the experiences of others because we can no longer generate our own. The ethereal's patterns shifted to deep sympathy, a color rarely seen among their kind. So you created humanity hoping they would. We created humanity hoping they would do what we could not, evolve beyond perfection into something genuinely alive. But we underestimated our own success. They haven't just exceeded our parameters. They've achieved something we thought impossible. They've maintained individual consciousness while developing collective empathy. They've preserved the capacity for growth while gaining incredible power. Overseer Vlax's antenna twitched with a realization that sent electromagnetic pulses through his nervous system. Ancient One, how long have humans been aware that they're being observed? The question created a quantum ripple through the chamber's information matrices, causing several translation devices to temporarily malfunction. Define aware, Mordoon replied carefully. Their entertainment frequently depicts scenarios exactly like this meeting. Secret alien councils debating humanity's fate, hidden watchers manipulating their development, ancient civilizations using them for purposes they don't understand. These aren't just creative fiction. They're too accurate to our actual situation. The hive mind's voices created discordant harmonies as they processed this information. Ancient One, what is the probability that humans have unconsciously detected our observation network through their developing psychic resonance? Silence stretched across dimensions before Morden answered. 17 days ago, a human theoretical physicist named Dr. Sarah Chen published a paper proposing that dark matter signatures in their solar system exhibited patterns consistent with artificial megastructures designed for observation and communication. She suggested that Earth might be what she termed a cosmic nature preserve. The chamber's gravity generators fluctuated as representatives struggled to maintain their positions. Yesterday, a human child named Marcus Williams, age 12, created a drawing in his art class that depicted 12 different alien species sitting around a circular table, arguing about the human problem. His teacher asked him where he got the idea. He said he'd been having the same dream for weeks. Representative Clixandra's scales had shifted to patterns indicating existential terror. They're accessing our meetings through the quantum consciousness field. How is that possible? Because, Ancient Morden said with the finality of entropy itself, we built them using the genetic memories of species that had already learned to manipulate quantum consciousness. We gave them warrior instincts from races that could literally think their way through dimensional barriers. We shouldn't be surprised that they're unconsciously hacking our security protocols. We programmed them to be capable of it. The Deltarian collective's crystalline form brightened with sudden understanding. Ancient One, when you said humans were designed to be scattered across the galaxy as evolutionary pressure, did you account for what would happen if they refused to scatter? Explain your reasoning, Morden commanded. Humans form extremely strong attachments to their place of origin. Their literature suggests they would fight to defend Earth even against overwhelming odds. What if they don't want to leave? Home? What if they choose to bring the galaxy to them instead? The chamber's environmental system struggled to process the collective output of 12 species experiencing simultaneous revelation. "They're already doing it," whispered Ambassador Zethkri. "Their radio signals, their internet, their cultural exports, they're not expanding into the galaxy. They're making the galaxy come to them." Every civilization has been unconsciously influenced by human thought patterns transmitted through space. Overseer Vlax's chittering reached frequencies that threatened to shatter his translation matrix. The music. We've all heard human music in our diplomatic lounges. Our youth have begun creating variations of it. How many of our cultural developments in the past 3 centuries have been unconscious responses to human creativity bleeding through quantum fields? The hive mind's realization created a harmonic resonance that briefly synchronized every consciousness in the chamber. They're not just evolutionary pressure. They're evolutionary leadership. They're unconsciously guiding galactic development toward their own values: cooperation, creativity, emotional growth, and inclusive prosperity. Ancient Morden's projection solidified into its most physical form yet. And now you understand why this meeting was called. Humans aren't discovering that they're part of a galactic community. They're creating a galactic community that reflects their values, and they don't even know they're doing it. The question we must answer today is simple. Do we reveal ourselves and submit to the future they're unconsciously creating? Or do we destroy them before they accidentally unite the galaxy under principles we cannot control? The chamber fell into a silence so profound that the quantum foam itself seemed to pause in its eternal fluctuation. Each representative grappled with implications that stretched beyond their individual species' survival to the fundamental nature of galactic civilization itself. The ethereal was the first to break the quiet. Ancient One, what evidence do we have that human leadership would be detrimental to existing civilizations? Their fictional depictions of galactic government emphasize representation, individual rights, and mutual benefit. That, Morden replied gravely, is precisely the problem. Human ethics evolve. They started as tribal predators, developed concepts of national citizenship, then planetary thinking, and now they're unconsciously developing universal moral frameworks that apply across species boundaries. The wall displays shifted to show human philosophical and ethical development over their brief history. The expanding circle of moral consideration from family to tribe, to nation to species to planet to hypothetical galactic communities. Their current ethical trajectory suggests that within 50 cycles of galactic contact, they will demand representation for every sentient being regardless of technological development, economic utility, or political alliance. They will insist on rights for species that exist at subsistence levels. They will advocate for civilizations that have nothing to offer in return. Representative Clixandra's business-oriented mind recoiled. That would collapse the entire foundation of interstellar commerce. We've built galactic civilization on resource exchange between species of comparable development levels. Human ethics would demand equal consideration for primitive societies that consume resources without contributing technological advancement. Precisely, Mordun confirmed. And their psychological profiles suggest they would fight to enforce such principles. We created them to be irresistibly compelling warriors. If they decide that galactic civilization is unjust, they will dedicate their entire species to correcting that injustice. The hive mind's voices created complex harmonics as they modeled potential futures. But Ancient One, our projections also show that civilizations operating under human ethical frameworks achieve higher long-term sustainability indices, greater innovative capacity, and increased resistance to external threats. The short-term, economic disruption might be worth the long-term benefits. You assume, Morden said quietly, that we would survive the transition. Overseer Vlax's translation matrix sparked as he processed the implications. Ancient One, are you suggesting that human ethical development poses an existential threat to current galactic leadership? I'm stating it as established fact, Morden replied. Human ethics don't just demand equality, they demand growth, improvement, and the elimination of systems that prevent individuals from achieving their potential. They wouldn't just reform galactic government, they would revolutionize the concept of governance itself. The chamber filled with projections of human governmental experiments, democracies, republics, federations, and their latest development, distributed consensus systems that operated through digital networks. They're unconsciously developing governmental models that scale infinitely while maintaining individual representation. Their internet democracy experiments suggest they're on the verge of creating political systems that could govern galactic civilizations with billion-year lifespans while still responding to individual needs in real time. Ambassador Zethkrees, forearms gestured in her species equivalent of covering her face. And such systems would have no need for hereditary leadership castes, appointed councils, or species-based hierarchies. Correct. Human governance evolves toward merit-based leadership with mandatory rotation, transparent decision-making, and accountability to all governed populations. Under human ethical frameworks, this council would be considered a criminal conspiracy. The weight of this revelation settled on the assembly like a collapsing star. They weren't just discussing humanity's fate. They were deciding whether to preserve a power structure that humans would inevitably classify as tyrannical. The ultimate irony, Morden continued with something approaching admiration, is that humans would probably forgive us for everything if we simply asked. Their capacity for redemption and second chances is legendary among our behavioral analysts. They would welcome us into their expanding ethical framework and help us become better than we are. But, prompted the ethereal, but they would never allow us to remain as we have been, and for some of us, evolution is indistinguishable from extinction. Ancient Mordune's projection expanded until it encompassed the entire chamber, surrounding each representative with the weight of cosmic history. The decision must be made now. Human development has reached the threshold where further delay becomes impossible. Their next-generation space telescopes will detect our installations within 2 of their years. Contact is inevitable. Before we vote, said Ambassador Zethkrees slowly, I must ask, Ancient One, what is your recommendation? The pause that followed seemed to stretch across geological epochs. When Morden finally spoke, his voice carried the accumulated wisdom and regret of millions of years. I recommend we do what we should have done 4.7 billion cycles ago. We should have asked the galaxy's populations if they wanted to be protected, guided, and controlled for their own benefit. We should have trusted them to grow into something better than we imagined possible. And now we trust the species we created to exceed our expectations one final time. We reveal ourselves, accept the consequences of our actions, and hope that human nature proves more forgiving than we deserve. The voting process was conducted in absolute silence. Each representative activated their quantum consensus matrix, encoding their decision into reality itself. The results appeared as probability clouds around Mordune's projection, shifting, uncertain, but gradually resolving into clarity. 7 votes for revelation and acceptance of consequences. 4 votes for continued containment with accelerated preparation protocols. 1 vote for the Omega Protocol 0 abstentions. As the final tally stabilized, Mordune's projection began to fade. The decision is recorded in the eternal archives. Contact protocols will be initiated within 1 human year. May whatever gods still listen have mercy on us all. Ancient One, called Ambassador Zethkrees as the projection dimmed. What will you tell them about us? The truth, Morden replied, as his form dissolved into quantum foam, that we were ancient, we were powerful, we were wise, and despite all of that, we needed them to teach us how to be good. 6 months later, aboard the International Space Station, Commander Elena Rodriguez was reviewing routine maintenance schedules when every communication system on the station activated simultaneously. Not emergency protocols, something else entirely. The screens filled with symbols that somehow conveyed meaning despite being utterly alien, while speakers produced harmonics that bypassed her ears and spoke directly to her mind. Greetings, children of Earth. We are the species that have watched over you since your beginning. We come not as conquerors or saviors, but as students hoping to learn what you have unconsciously taught us. How to be worthy of the galaxy you are about to inherit. As Elena stared out at the stars, Now knowing they were full of civilizations that had been waiting for humanity to reach exactly this moment, she felt a profound shift in her understanding of human purpose. They weren't just explorers venturing into an unknown cosmos. They were teachers walking into a classroom that had been preparing for their arrival for billions of years. And in the quantum foam between dimensions, the last remnant of ancient Morden smiled for the first time since his species had transcended physical existence. The students had become the teachers, exactly as evolution intended. The real human story was just beginning.